On behalf of the Press Institute of India, this is Sashi Naya, extending to all of you a very warm welcome to today's discussion, which is very topical. We are looking at the Sri Lanka crisis and the impact of the crisis on India-Lanka ties. And we will also try and look at the way ahead. I'm particularly delighted to welcome our friends from Sri Lanka, Mr. Jaham Pereira, Mr. Muthulingam, and Mr. Ishwaran Ratnam. Thank you all for so readily agreeing to be a part of this program and for joining from Colombo and Kandy. And a big hello, of course, to Professor Suryanarayan here in Chennai, and also Arun Janardhanan from the Indian Express, and an old colleague of mine. We've done several programs together on national security and foreign policy, Mr. Heblika, who joins us from Bangalore. And last but not the least, a warm welcome to Mr. Ramakrishnan, who will, of course, moderate this program. A year ago, or perhaps even a few months ago, few of us, except perhaps the experts, might have expected something like this, a crisis, both economic and political, to hit Sri Lanka. It's in many ways a story of the dramatic fall of the Rajapaksas from Sri Lanka's most powerful political dynasty in decades, perhaps, and once considered heroes by many in the island nation, reduced today to a family desperately trying to cling to power. The slide of Sri Lanka's economy has been as dramatic, shall we say. It's been swift and painful. And there are fears that things will only get worse before it begins to improve. There are various questions. Is an IMF bailout possible? Will such a bailout help the common people? And more significantly, can India-Lanka ties get closer? And is there a prescription to overcome the crisis? Or is there a credible roadmap? I think these are some of the questions or aspects that will come to the fore as Mr. Ramakrishnan steers this program forward. Before I hand it over to him, let me just mention, although we know him well, to others who don't, Mr. Ramakrishnan, I think 2022 marks his 30th year with the Hindu, if I'm not mistaken. He's been a journalist with the Hindu for 30 years now. He's now associate editor. And a few years ago, the Hindu had asked him to serve in Colombo as the Sri Lanka and Maldives correspondent. And during his stint in Colombo, he has interacted with a wide range of people from different hues, including the president, the prime minister, and Tamil leaders. And several of his articles from Colombo have covered the status of life of those who got their lands back, held by the Sri Lankan armed forces for years. There have also been articles on the progress of implementation of the housing scheme funded by the Indian government and the living conditions of who returned to northern province after living in Tamil Nadu as refugees for years. He's also written a number of articles on the hill country Tamils, one of the most neglected groups in Sri Lanka. So Mr. Ramakrishnan comes with a rich experience in Sri Lanka, and he continues to follow events there closely. He also writes articles on Indo-Lanka ties, etc. And he's, I think, supremely qualified to moderate this discussion. Over to you, Mr. Ramakrishnan. Mr. Ramakrishnan, I think you're on mute.
I have been muted right now.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
fine.
Please take over. Please take
over. Thanks, Sashi, for your nice, kind remarks. Friends, we are having the discussion here amid an unprecedented economic crisis in Sri Lanka and a prolonged protest by people in Colombo and elsewhere. A combination of complex factors has contributed to the present situation in the country. As you all know, India has provided an assistance of over 3 billion US dollars in getting addressed diverse needs of people and the government of Sri Lanka. It is against this background that the Press Institute of India is organizing this discussion on an important topic of the current times. I hope the speakers will also dwell upon temporary and permanent solutions that Sri Lanka can have. I would request the speakers, especially those from Sri Lanka, to respond to a few of my questions also. One, what is the probability of the present agitation or movement acquiring the shape of a political entity, political organization? You would be aware that in 2011 in Delhi, there was a protest by Anna Hazare and all that. But then it was AAP, Aam Aadmi Party, that led to the birth of the Aam Aadmi Party. Whereas in 2017 in Chennai, you had this Jallikattu agitation. Lakhs of people had converged on the Marina Beach. They were there for about a week or so for this Jallikattu, this bullfight. They thought that that right had been taken away. Anyhow, but that didn't lead to any birth of any party, political party in Tamil Nadu. And then there are some similarities between the what we are seeing on the Gulf face and in Delhi or Chennai. As happened in Chennai, also people there is people in Colombo. They don't agitators don't want to have any tie-up, any arrangement with political parties. So on the face of it, okay, they seem to be having aversion towards established political parties. And then is an economic collaboration with the southern part of India a feasible idea politically and even otherwise? So this is being talked about for quite some time. Ranil, and then I think these days Harsha also speaks about it. And then finally, is this an opportune moment for resolving, or at least making a serious bid to find a lasting solution to the ethnic problem? I will also, before I hand it over the first speaker, Dr. Jahan Pereira, I will finish all the introduction in the sense of all the speakers at one go, okay? And then I will hand it over to Dr. Jahan. Jahan wears many hats: a peace activist, a conflict resolution specialist, a product of Harvard, and the head of an institution that has been in existence for 27 years, National Peace Council. He's a commentator on a host of contemporary political and social issues concerning Sri Lanka. As one who enjoyed his hospitality, I have a great pleasure in inviting him to share his views on today's topic. Dr. Muthulingam is the founder of the 31-year-old Institute of Social Development, Kandy. He has devoted himself to issues and problems concerning workers, especially those in plantations. Muthulingam participated in a socialist revolutionary movement for some years, while serving as a representative of trade unions in Lanka General Services Union and the Workers and Patients Institute, which was founded by the veteran sociologist Dr. Newton Gunasinghe. He had to go underground in the mid-80s when he spent some time in India. He runs a museum and archive in Paradeka, Kambola, on the way to Nuvarelia for the community in a century-old structure which once housed workers' quarters. Third, Iswaran Ratnam. One of the three speakers, I think, if I am not wrong, is the youngest of them, but that doesn't make him in any way less accomplished than others. A leading journalist of Sri Lanka, he has been the managing editor of Colombo Gazette, a non-profit website which has bagged several accolades. He has held various positions in different media organizations. At present, he is with the Daily Mirror, and in his talk show, which is quite popular, he has been covering politicians of different hues. Mr. P.M. Heblika is the Managing Trustee, Institute of Contemporary Studies, Bangalore, former Special Secretary, Government of India, a specialist in insurgency and counterinsurgency in India's northeast region, Myanmar, Bangladesh, Bhutan, Sri Lanka, and Nepal. He has supervised China-related work and developments in South Asia and Southeast Asia. He is associated with several universities in India and overseas on issues of national security. He is a member of the board of directors of Asian Dialogue Society at Singapore. Professor Surya Narayan is the oldest hand as far as Sri Lanka is concerned, and a long association with the Center for South and Southeast Asian Studies, University of Madras. He is with the two think tanks in Chennai, the Center for Asia Studies and Chennai Center for China Studies. He was a member of the international monitoring team, which monitored the presidential election in Sri Lanka in 1999. And finally, and not the least, Arun Janardhan. Arun is an assistant editor with the Indian Express based in Chennai. He has served other institutions as well. He has extensively covered Sri Lanka in the past 7 years, including all major political and social events, Easter Sunday blasts, besides a series of interviews with prominent personalities of Sri Lanka. He has also written, he is also a screenplay writer, and his film Arakriyam, a feature film, which was released in April 2021. So I now invite Dr. Jahan to inaugurate the discussion. Dr. Jahan?
Yes, thank you, Ramakrishnan. I'm very pleased to be here and to speak to you and also to hear from you. Actually, I'm very pleased that I'm discussing this with Indians and with those from Tamil Nadu. We are actually very grateful to India for the great assistance it is giving us in this difficult time. And we are very heartened by the response of the Tamil Nadu government to give all Sri Lankans, I mean, whatever aid that is being given, that they are prepared to give it to all Sri Lankans. I think those are very positive gestures. I mean, in the sense, in what India has been giving is not a gesture, it is real assistance to us. Even today, you see, today is a Hartal day, but you will see huge lines of people on the road waiting to get petrol and diesel or gas. I mean, it's very terrible to see this sight and the suffering that we have to undergo because it's really hot at this time. And to see people in their cars, like queuing up, lining up for a kilometer is terrible. But it would have been much worse if not for the Indian support that we have been getting. Now, very briefly, I want to just say that the root cause of what has happened, I just want to refer to what Sashi said, that it was something that was not imaginable a year ago. And I say, even we never imagined this to happen. Never thought that Sri Lanka would come to this very sorry pass. A year ago, maybe 2 years ago, we were being called an upper middle income country. And it seemed a little odd that Sri upper middle income, because of course, at the lowest level, like we had just passed the $4,000 per capita income. And that's where the upper middle income starts at 4,100. And we had just crossed that. So we were at the very lowest level of upper middle income, but it just didn't seem to be real because I mean, I have gone to other countries which are upper middle income and they are much, much more prosperous than us. So there was something wrong. But anyway, it gave us some pride that now we were upper middle income. But so we never dreamt that this would happen to us. And also that the Rajapaksas, that they could be so reviled as they are today. And that little children should be shouting that the president is a rogue and that he should go, and Basil is something to do with a crow. And even in the schools now, I heard that even in the schools, these little children are shouting because these very catchy tunes and catchy slogans. So they are shouting this even inside the schools. So it was something, I mean, unimaginable because we saw the Rajapaksas. I mean, in a way, we knew that they were taking money and there was a lot of corruption. We knew that. But on the other hand, we took it for granted that our people will continue to support them because of what they did. And because they were like a royal family, like kings in this country. And even now, it's hard to imagine that they will go, and at the moment, they don't seem to want to go at all. And they're still staying on. But the base has changed. The base, everyone I meet will speak very strongly against the Rajapaksas. In particular, they're focusing on them. Now, just to be a little bit fair, I think that if you look at the root cause of this problem, the economic collapse, it's that we live beyond our means. We were borrowing all the time. We were borrowing for consumption on the basis that we were like an upper middle income country. So everything, all the luxuries were very, very freely available here. Then, so consumption, we borrowed and then spent it on consumption, not on investment. Then secondly, where investments were concerned, we went in for a lot of these white elephant projects, and mostly those came from China. Even though our debt to China is not so huge, I heard it's about 10%, the payments, the repayments that we have to make to China, about 10% of the outstanding, the debt. But anyway, whatever we bought, generally what we borrowed from China ended up as a white elephant project, huge, the highest tower in South Asia or something, which is now empty, the Lotus Tower. Then the airport in Mattala in the middle of a jungle, with hardly any planes coming. The port where we were told that there'll be, 50,000 ships coming in every year, and maybe 500 are coming every year. So we were totally misled by those white elephant projects. And of course, the corruption. So we borrowed money, but it was not used for productive purposes. So that's the root cause. And that started a long time ago, even before the Rajapaksas, it started. But I think under the Rajapaksas, it accelerated. Now, the proximate cause, the immediate cause for this crisis came after the election. Immediately after the election, the presidential elections in 2019, when the government was now facing the general election, as soon as they won the presidential election, they declared a tax break and halved the taxes, and especially for the rich people and the companies. And as a result, the tax revenue dropped very drastically. That's one. And then there's the justification was that you reduce the taxes, people work harder, and the businesses will invest more, and the economy will boom. But then, unfortunately, COVID came. So the tax breaks came without the production, without the increase in capacity. Then came the most disastrous decision of our president. Very stubbornly, he decided that we would shift over to organic farming in a day. Just one day's notice, and we are now 100% going to organic farming, and everything, all chemical fertilizers banned. So that took about 6 months to reverse. And actually the start of today's protests were the farmers who came out. In isolated areas, it didn't really resonate with the rest of the country because this was the farmers protesting, and the government was saying, don't know this fertilizer thing, it'll work, organic, it'll work, and we must go this direction. So most people were not, too bothered. People were not living in the agricultural sector, that the farmers were. And then the third major reason for this is that refusal to go to the IMF. Refusal. Even 3 years ago, before this government came, under the previous government, we had a very good governor of the central bank. And he warned, even 3 years ago, he said, we are going to come to this pass where we will not be able to borrow enough. We have to go to the IMF. We have to adjust ourselves. It will be a little painful, but let's do it. Now, this was 3 years ago, before this government came in. Then this government came in and they refused to go to the IMF until disaster struck. So now we have our people, most people are blaming the Rajapaksas for this. And basically the summary of the argument is that the Rajapaksas have stolen the dollars. And that's the fury that people have, that the Rajapaksas, all the dollars in our country have been stolen by them. And they even shipped it out in container loads to Uganda. There are stories like that. And people kind of believe this. So this is the background to this. And I think I may be talking a bit too long now because it's the opening session, but India's generosity, that is remarkable. There's no criticism of India now. No criticism. There was a little criticism of India at the beginning when India also got us to sign, I think, 5 defense treaties, which India had been trying to get us to sign beforehand. And now to get this aid, the first billion that we got from India, we had to sign these 5. There was a bit of criticism, but I now don't see any. I don't know what Eastern said, because Eastern probably follows the media much more closely than I, but I don't see any criticism of India at the moment. And there's also this, in a way, a very positive, sort of maybe too much blasé feeling that, oh, India will bail us out. India will bail us out even in the future. That hope is there, but I know it must be very difficult for India. India, a lot of poor people itself, who India must look after, and that they should be giving it to Sri Lanka. And we are grateful. We are very grateful to it. And I'll stop with that for the time being.
Okay. Jehan, would you like to respond to any of my questions?
Yes, what are the questions?
The questions were about, I see, one is the Ranil has been talking about a collaboration between Sri Lanka and southern states of India. Okay. And then number 2 is whether this struggle, this movement, this agitation will take the shape of a political party, will acquire the shape of a political party in future. Do you foresee any such thing happening? Finally, is this an opportune moment to address this Tamil question?
Yeah, very, very briefly about on the first one. I would always have been happy if Sri Lanka had forged closer ties with the south of India. Now, I think this is a real good chance to see all countries come to a certain point where they have to reboot themselves. They have to go in a new path, a new direction, a new ethos. And up to now, Sri Lankans, as a Sinhalese, the majority, have seen India as essentially a historical enemy, along with the Tamil people. Because in the Sinhalese history is written how whenever the Sinhala kingdoms were flourishing, there were invasions from the south of India which destroyed those kingdoms. And the Tamil people then expanded. Then more recently, what happened with the LTT, the Indian support at the beginning for the LTT. Now, I think we must make a break with, so when Ranil Wickramasinghe was talking, although it made rational sense, there was resistance within the Sinhala, I think the Sinhala society, the Sinhala polity, because the memory that, India is something to be guarded against. India has been a threat to us. India can be a threat in the future. So this thinking is there in us. It needs to go. It's there in our history. It's taught to our children from a young age. I went through that history, so I know what it is. There has to be a break. We have to reinterpret our history. This is a very good opportunity to do that, because as I said, there is no anti-Indian feeling now. And we are actually very grateful and think India is our lifeline. India is going to save us. So I think we have to be careful, I think, but this is an opportunity to redo our history, rethink our history. I hope we do it because things really are changing in our country. And this is the best opportunity for that. With regard to the political party, at the moment, I don't see a new political party emerging, but I see some of the older parties gaining strength. The old left, say the JVP, which on 2 occasions engaged in violence against the Sri Lankan state, and tens of thousands died in 1971 and 1988-89. It's like what the Maoist type of insurrection that is there in different parts of India. Is that type of vision this JVP revolted, and but now they are becoming more mainstream because they are the ones who are in the forefront. They are the ones who are pointing out the government's corruption. They are the ones who have files on the government leaders and they are exposing them. And what is very new about what's happening today in the protests is that we are now seeing the young people as actually, in the past, we saw them as troublemakers, as riffraff, as the university students who are actually the core of the protest that's coming day and staying on in Galle Face, where the big protests are taking place in front of the presidential secretariat. The core of them come from the university system. And the core is also unionized. I mean, there are student unions, and those student unions are controlled by two very radical left parties. But now the older generation is seeing the youth who are protesting as actually we are on the same side. And there are some of us who actually think we should go there to protect the youth, because the police are used to assaulting the young people and the university students, because they are treated as troublemakers, as riffraff. But when the older people go, it's harder for the police to do that. So anyhow, what I see is a bonding. There's also a certain bonding in terms of ethnicity there. For the first time, I hear these young people shouting slogans saying, "No to racism, we will not get tricked again by racism, by the racism of politicians who try to get our votes." But at the same time, it requires, I mean, when it comes to issues of power sharing, devolution of power, federalism, then again, the old divisions can re-emerge. So we have to be careful about that. But at the moment, I don't see a new political party coming up. I see the old parties, the JVP, the left party, gaining in strength. I don't know whether at elections, it never really translates into votes. So this time it may be different. And that's what I think. And I think that
ethnic question, whether this is an opportune moment to address this question.
Now, on that, there is a certain, as I said, in the big protests, we hear this slogan: "No to racism. We will not be tricked again by politicians who turn us against one another." That thinking is there. However, what I have also noticed when I went to the north, in the north, the people are not so involved in these protests. The majority of people. And when I asked the civil activists of why this is so, they give many reasons. They said, for one thing, they said, "We did not vote the Rajapaksa. We never voted for the Rajapaksa. So there's no need for us to come and protest. We were never for them. It's the Sinhalese who have to show that they are against the Rajapaksa." That's one. Then secondly, they say, when we suffered, we also suffered. We suffered much more than this. But the Sinhalese didn't join us at that time. They didn't support us. So that bitterness is there. Then third, they say, even if the Rajapaksas are chased off, sent off, and new government comes, they also will ignore our problem. They also will, because that's been the practice over the years. So that divide is there. And then on the Sinhala side, we can see, even now, we can see government people are trying to divide. They are saying, the latest is to say, because the Catholic Church has been also in the forefront of the protest because of Easter bombing. The Catholic Church says they trusted this government to investigate the Easter bombing. The Easter bombing happened under the previous government. They trusted this government leadership to investigate the Easter bombing. This government has not done it. And now the church is saying this government actually benefited from the Easter bombing. Therefore, the evidence seems to suggest that this government leadership was actually participant in the Easter bombing. And they are protesting fully. Now the propaganda is being spread that there is I saw on the social media that there is a world Catholic conspiracy to spread Catholicism and to come to Sri Lanka. So they're trying to use, the government side is using everything it can, the racism. Then I think at the beginning itself, the Prime Minister said something like this. He said, these young people must not insult the armed forces. The armed forces are the ones who supported and saved the country. The young people are not insulting the armed forces. In fact, the young people who are protesting are carrying the Sri Lankan flag and going everywhere, and they are not at all insulting the soldiers. So, but I think that this is a time where the ethnic issue can be addressed, but we have to be a little careful, because where we are all united is on the economic issue, on the issue of corruption, but on the issue of ethnic justice, there needs to be education also done before we can really go into that. I mean, that's the summary.
Thanks a lot, Jahan, for your illuminating speech. Now I would request Mr. Hebliker to make his marks. Mr. Heblikar?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Ramakrishnan. It's good to see you back on the screen and interact with people like us. And good morning to all my Sri Lankan friends and to my Indian colleagues who are on this show. Firstly, let me say that as far as Sri Lanka is concerned, as I look at it, Jahan has covered the mosaic very well. And I want to just say 4 points that I heard the Sri Lankan finance minister's interview with Nitin Gokhale a few days ago, where he was very blunt and where he was very contrite that what is his view of the current situation, why it has come to a sorry pass, and what is intended to be done and how the future is going to look like. And I think Ali Sabri's articulation was very, very, illuminating, to use that word, because I think he did not was not afraid to pull his punches. He he was able to shine the torch on those areas which people are not seen, and the very areas which Jahan has pointed out, and Ali Sabri was very, very forthright. As I see it, the next 12 to 18 months are going to be a very troubled period in Sri Lanka's economic history and economic development. I think much more is required by them to make sacrifices which have been a part of their life for the last 30, 40 years. This time, I think much more is going to be expected from them. The issue at stake today is that none of the political parties have actually told us what is the panacea for the economic problem. Most of them want either the prime minister to go or the president to go. There is no idea whether they would like to go back to and have a general election, which is not possible under the present circumstances. What is the way forward? And I would, because since the political parties, not one single political party has, I think, to my knowledge, given me a roadmap as to how he is going to address this economic issue. And as far as I'm concerned, the redressal of the economic issues has to be seen in 4 verticals. You have to look at the Constitution. What is it that the Constitution needs to do, or has the Constitution the ability to do something in its present format, or do we require the Constitution to undergo a series of changes? What is going to be the 19th Amendment plus, which people are suggesting, where the power will get circulated among those who are in office today? The second one is about the economic policies. If you look at what Ali Sabri has said, I think he has laid the blame at the doorstep of those who are in office today, and he has been very categorical. He says in a population of 22 or 23 million, Sri Lanka has a civil service of 1.6 million. Where does the government get funds to pay their salaries and their pensions if Sri Lanka is not able to create that amount of revenue by itself? Now, that brings me to the question that Sri Lanka has a huge armed force at its disposal, the police force. How does the government intend to create, bring down the civil service and this civil servant participation in government's economic policies? The third issue is political issues. Are the political parties in a position to create a better environment for the country's economic policies? Are they in a position to make those sacrifices that people want? I think the general refrain of people on the streets is not only for the president to go home, I think it is also an expression of no confidence in the politicians who are in office today. It may not be the 225 members of parliament. It could be even for those who are in the provincial councils or in the local bodies. I think there is a great deal of unhappiness. There is a great deal of no confidence, not only in the civil service, but in the political class. What has happened today on the watch of the Mahinda Rajapaksa and the Gota's problems is a legacy issue. It has happened over the last 60, 70 years. And as I said, after the 2009, when this insurgency ended, Sri Lanka did not take any particular step to address a post-insurgency period. What were the economic, social, and other policies that the government would have put in? What was the money that would have been made available to meet a post-economic, post-victory arrangements? I didn't see any. For example, when India signed the peace accord with the Mizo National Front in 1986, we had a post-ceasefire action plan, which worked efficiently and effectively. And today, I think Mizoram is one of the most peaceful states in India's northeast. Sri Lanka did not have a plan. Even after the accusations of the kind that have been floating around, I think the Sri Lankan government took it upon itself to protect whom people accused of having been involved in those situations. I think that ghost has not gone away, and neither will it go. Last but not the least, the situation, as I say, how does the socio-cultural environment be seen today? We heard Jahan say, we heard others talk about what the people think about the aid and assistance given by India. What do people think about India's past participation in Sri Lankan political activities? And what is it that is going to be the future? As far as I see, so what Ranil Wickramasinghe told me in 2004 was that he would like everybody in India's neighborhood to think that India is an opportunity and that India is not a threat. He says, how can a country of 1.2 billion not become an opportunity for its neighboring countries? Now we have the example of the trade between India and Bangladesh, which has gone up to unprecedented lengths. So there is something that has always been very strong political and economic relationship. With Nepal, with Bhutan, other countries too, we don't have that serious a problem as we seem to have in other places. The fourth point which is necessary is to create the kind of trust which is necessary. And I don't think that the government of Sri Lanka, the government of India are alone in this. I think there are many other stakeholders. But most important is that, like what was said earlier, can India, 6 southern states of India, welcome Sri Lanka into their economic fold? I think it is not impossible. I think a few weeks ago, the Sri Lankan High Commissioner to India, Milinda Morogoda, said that his government is open to India's participation in 8 sectors of Sri Lankan economy. And I think all those 8 sectors are high-rise sectors, are high-value sectors. And I find no reason that why we don't begin to talk about it now. And last but not the least, as I look at it, we also need to understand as to why Sri Lanka has come to this pass. What are the various opportunities available to it? And does the Sri Lankan political establishment continue to have a myopic view of its relationship with countries? For example, when President Gota gave that interview to Nitin Gokhale in 2019, immediately after his victory, he named 6 countries with whom Sri Lanka would like to take forward its relationship. Of course, he mentioned India, he mentioned Singapore, he mentioned Australia, he mentioned South Korea, he mentioned Japan, and he mentioned one other country and China. And I think none of the other countries, excepting India and now Japan, to whom Sri Lanka's appealed for assistance, don't seem to figure anywhere in the roadmap of this presidency. So you cannot, afford to create friends when you need them. Friends are certainly when the times of need, but you cannot pick and choose. I think a time has come that Sri Lanka, the political establishment, the civil service has to reboot itself. And I would like to know as to, even after recovery in 16 to 18 months, what will the political establishment do? Will it be able to take forward the reforms to their logical conclusions? Will they be able to take forward the constitutional aspirations of their own people? How will they bridge the divide between the majoritarian Sinhala society and the minorities? And last but not the least, how will they create a better environment for socio-economic understanding of the problems of the country? I think there are a lot of questions that the political class, the four houses in the Sangha need to answer, because I see last year only there were so much of protests against India's participation in the East Container project. And the very people who were at the vanguard of that movement seem to have suddenly abandoned the government. And how does Sri Lanka calibrate its relationship with China? I think the honeymoon with China is more or less at an end. And we hope that, it's finally is finished. And I think the Sri Lankans can now live outside that shadow of the Chinese threat. I think with those comments, Mr. Ramakrishnan, I will take a pause. I'll be happy to answer your questions. Thank you.
Yes. Thanks a lot, Mr. Eblika, for your thought-provoking speech. I now request Mr. Muthulingam to join.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting for this discussion. I think Dr. Jayan has explained the background of the economic crisis and also the current prevailing situation in relation to the youth struggle. But I'd like to pinpoint something. Mr. Jayan also mentioned that the youths are now shouting that no more racism or get rid of from human rights, sorry, that religious fundamentalism. And those are the slogans put forward by the youths in the Gotagama, that is where the youths are sitting in Colombo, as well as there are so many places in Kandy and Gaul and the important city. There are supporting groups who are there. But among the slogans, there is one slogan. I don't know the singular or English word for that. I'm thinking that one slogan is Lankava Indiava Atakolwak. That is, Sri Lanka became a I think, Dihan, what is the translation for Atakoluwa?
Catchpaw. I think it's catchpaw.
Catchpaw. So that is the one of the slogan put forward by even myself. I also participated in several days in Colombo as well as in Kandy. And that is the one slogan amidst the other slogan. So that indicates still, even though India in the critical juncture assisted us to overcome by giving loans and also for these grant, what has happened was, when soon as Dr. Jaisanga visited Sri Lanka, while giving assurance for the grant and the loan, he has signed an agreement with the Sri Lankan government. Among the 6 agreements, the two most thing is the security of the maritime, and the second thing is the getting the 3 what is that hybrid power of Jaffna 3 islands, and also the developing fisheries harbors and the oil tanks. So this agreement, these components push the youths who are now currently shouting "Go home" or "Gota." They think that this is the situation where we are in a critical position, but India try to grab us. So that is the thinking still prevailing, because I used to talk with the Antare, that is the inter university school. University college of students who are protesting. It's called Antare, Inter-University Federation. I had a dialogue with them also. They said India is good, but they are giving supports, but they are trying to fish in the troubled water. Now they are trying to conquer our country. That is the thing. Another group of people, they had a dialogue with them also. I told in some of the discussion also, because that is a purely independent liberal, that is, they are not aligned with any political party. Those are the groups who are working among the Gotagama. That group also having a yes, the India is supporting, but only thing is we have a doubt. Then the third group, one of the powerful group, another one is a Peratugami. There is a breakaway group of JEP political party. They also in the part and parcel of this protest, and they also every day they also having a march. They also have the same ideology. So what I think was, when I thinking about these the young generation who are now against the racism, against the religious fundamentalism, and also they need a kind of a government where everybody can enjoy the human rights and democracy, but still they have a doubt on India. Then if you look at the, I know that Professor Suryanarayan also wrote and quote several times, our history, because in 1940s, when J.R. Jayawardena, when he went to address the Ramgarh conference in India, he had the opportunity to meet his delegation, to meet our the Mahatma Gandhiji. At that time, they raised the issue of the Indians, because at that time the anti-racism against India is in Sri Lanka is very high because of the 1930s recession. So, and Gandhiji told them the situation in Sri Lanka related to Indians are pathetic, and he have mentioned. But at that time, JR told him, yes, apart from the Indian laborers, there are petty traders and chettiars. They are the people who are exploiting us. They are the people who are dominating import and export. So that is then Gandhi had replied, yes, that's also true, but it is a fault of both sides. Then again, 1947, another leading politician, then S.W. Bandaranaike, he went to 1947 to India, and when he addressed the gatherings of the Indian National Congress people, that is called the South Asian Asian Relation Conference organized by Mrs. Sarojini Naidu. At that time, I won't read that, also small part on that. Then it was broadcast in the Indian radio also. That is what our Bandaranaike said. India must remember that it is the duty of a great and mighty to be just and even generous to the small and weak, and to remote from their minds not only the substance but even the shadow of the suspicion and the apprehension. I think suspicion and apprehension is continuously from the Sri Lankan side is continuing, because they think that India will anytime they will gulp us, or they will engulf all the Sri Lanka, and that's why they also not supporting the part of the people who are not the ethnic question. So here also I feel, because when I had while this Gotagama protest is going on, there are so many dialogues, discussion take place among the civil society members. So I am also one part and parcel of the in the discussion. Mostly the discussions are organized by the single academics and the politician and the activists. But very rarely I see that there are discussion taking place among the Tamil academics or political activists or the social activists. But in the singular academia or the intellect field, when I raised this issue, because they also put forward, even the Bar Association, everyone put forward the slogan or a demand that get it off from executive presidency and they form a new government with consist of the whole party, and they are not just mentioning anything about the minority rights. Then when I questioned that with the teams, they said this is not a good time to discuss on the ethnic issues, because we want to get it off from this Mahinda Rajapaksa regime. That is the main. So then I asked the question, So do you think that what Mr. Ramakrishnan also raised, is there any possibility to think about the whether this will lead to for a solution to the ethnic question? They said, no, we will take it later. That is, but this is prevail not only among the academics and the social activists, but these are the mentalities prevailing even the some opposition party leading members also when I talk to them. So I feel that this struggle, which is initiated by the youngsters, it will continue. But only thing is, it won't lead any kind of a solution, seeking solution to the ethnic issues. In the near future, it can be take place after when the government was changed. But only thing is there is no any color we can see in. But at the same time, the anti-Indian feelings, Dr. Jayan mentioned, because yes, yesterday Mr. Prime Minister expressed his congratulations or to the Tamil Nadu government. But only thing is, if you see, none of the politicians except Mr. Mano Ganesan in the parliament, most of the people are not praising or highlighting the Indians' contribution during the crisis period. So why is that? Because still, even because the part of the struggle was in the forefront are the JVP and the Paratagami. What is their ideology? Their ideology, India is a expansionist, because they have the ideology from the JV, right? It's the fifth class is Indian expansionism. Because now, even the media, if you look at the media, this is they also have that the media of Sri Lanka. Media of Sri Lanka try to highlight whenever the Indian negotiation for taking off these the arbor or what is that called, the hybrid power, and also they are highlighting in the media first the Indian bilateral agreement. Second will be, they will the China also taken the Sri Lankan harbor, and also they given the land for the build the island and all that. But the priority will be given, or exposed, or the priority will be given to the Indian agreement. So this is coming from the 1930s onward. The young generation also become the victim of this ideology. They are obsessed with an idea because India is a bigger threat to us. So I didn't feel anything, because they will like that, India is giving the support, but if you go for a next time, they will forget that. So my suggestion is in order to using this crisis, in order to get it off from the ideology and the fear which is prevailing among the majority community, then we should have a kind of a, while bilateral agreements are signed in between the government, we should promote the community relation, because now the culture is one of the thing. Everybody, even from the beginning, any politician come, we have a tie with the India culturally and historically and language and everything will mention, but there is no any kind of relations to build that. So culturally, because for example, if there is a possibility, India can assist us in this critical junction to send some youth from the Indian government. They can say, there are so many volunteer groups in India, they can send some youth with some food pack, then go with work with the Sri Lankan community. Then the Sri Lankan community get withdraw from the fear psychosis. That is the main thing. And also there are so many Tamil Nadu government, any southern part of the government, they can also send with some pack to go and meet with the one thing. They can have the bilateral agreement with the government, but at the same time they should build even the chambers, because now chambers also doing some kind of a charity. Why can't the Tamil Nadu chambers or other chambers of which are in the state wise, they can link with the local chambers? And is there any possibility, because now the media, one media is the Sirasai, they are also promoting anti-Indian ideology, but is there any possibility link with the media people, the local media people of India? They can come and they can also work with this. Through that only, I'm thinking we can build the relationship to get it off from the fear psychosis. Otherwise, I don't think that sending goods or signing agreement or giving grant or loan in this juncture, people will prepare. but only thing is it won't be a last long. The last long should be a community-community relation we have to build. And also there's a suggestion, what also suggestion by even one of the economics also suggest we can build a relationship with the southern part of India, that is the develop Tamil Nadu, Andhra and all that. That's also a good thing, but only thing is we should develop the culture where that culturally, when we develop only, we can get it off from the peer psychosis. Unless we break the peer psychosis, we are not in a position, because China, because still the people feels, even the politician, they are thinking China is far away. Even if they comes, it won't be a bigger problem for us. But we are in the doorstep of the India. So India's stepping to Sri Lanka means it's a always threat to our sovereignty. That is the thinking. It's trickled down to the farmers. That is the bottom line. Because you should not forget one thing. Every time, keep it in mind, because the SARS book also, even Professor Surya Narayan also mentioned on that, because the religious factor, the Buddhist religious factor is the most powerful factor. It can be create ideologically anti-Indian mentality, because when you enter into because in Sri Lanka, because every Buddhist student should go to the full moon day to the temple. In the temple, they will quote the Mahavamsa. From the Mahavamsa, Damila it's NT. From the Mahavamsa to up to the Indian peacekeeping force, which landed near Sri Lanka, every time Sri Lanka is facing the threat from India. So therefore, the religious factors also working very hard. So there is now the Indian government is giving opening all the Sanchi, all the airport and everything. But only thing is there is no any kind of a build between the religious leaders. You should bring now to Tamil Nadu. You can show that where the Pondicherry within the Tamil Nadu is existing, and the Karaikal is another part of the Pondicherry. So that type of ideologically we should give environment to them, where the federalism or the dividing, what is that, devolving power is not leading to the country to divide the country and align with the Tamil Nadu. So I think in that way only we can take this opportunity, and it is a starting point to get it off from the peer psychosis of the majority. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mr. Muthulingam, for your well-meaning ideas. In fact, your suggestion has kindled me the memories of Gopalan Trophy, which took place annually between Ceylon team and Tamil Nadu team or Madras team. And it went on till Sri Lanka got test status, and then it got disrupted. Maybe that kind of event, that kind of tournament can be revived. It is the people-to-people contacts that tier 2 approach that has to be revived. I now request Professor Surya Narayan to make his speech. Professor Surya Narayan.
Can't hear.
Now can you hear me? Yes. Please go ahead.
Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
At the outset, express my deep sense of appreciation to Mr. Shashi Nair and Ramakrishnan for taking the initiative to organize this panel discussion with members from both countries. I think this is the first instance that Chennai has such a meeting. I congratulate once again Shashi and Ramakrishnan for taking the initiative. At the end of the month, I have been invited to the India International Center in New Delhi to speak on this subject. And I have also persuaded India International Center to organize a binational seminar affecting all aspects of India's penal code. He telephoned me yesterday and I asked him how much time I can take. And he said 12 to 15 minutes. It's about 20 minutes for a doctor to warm up in the classroom. Expect him to conclude his presentation in 12 to 15 minutes is an arduous task. But I try to be as brief as possible. The housing actress Elizabeth Taylor told her husband soon after her ninth marriage, this too shall be brief. Can you hear me?
A lot of interruptions.
Whatever you can listen, it's not anyway. My presentation
No,
is
you
not
can.
work. I am not a specialist in Dickman science, that is what we call economics, but I make some common sense comments. It's not the first time that I gave you a battle is a AMF. In 1965, Sri Lanka had been approaching the IMF for financial assistance. In 1965 to 2000, Sri Lanka had approached IMF 16 times to stabilize the economy. The most important question is that Sri Lanka is approaching the IMF for a loan to repay the loans, not so much to stabilize the economy. Not only Sri Lanka which is facing this problem, many developing countries like Pakistan, Argentina, Brazil, Greece and Spain have been more or less in the same position as Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka, as I mentioned to you, is 17 approach to IMF. The country is on the brink of economic collapse. Is for a loan to repay a earlier loan. We have external debt which is too much US dollars, billion, which is 6% of the country's national wealth. One of the important reasons for the total uprising is the fall in agricultural production, the rise in the price of commodities. It is necessary to recall the fact that at the time of independence, Sri Lanka was a food deficit economy. A lot of food grains used to be imported from elsewhere. In fact, it goes to the credit of D.S. Indo-Lanka, who was the first leader and he started some highway project in India for the irrigation project. As a result of it, 2 years ago, Sri Lanka used to produce most of its food requirements, as of rice requirements, not food requirements. And the unfortunate result of it was a demographic change which took place in the eastern province, and the Sinhalese farmers were encouraged to migrate there. So you have a situation where Sinhalese, Tamils and Muslims are more or less democratic. From the point of view of Tamil Nadu, one of the things that worries the flow of refugees to India. We want to welcome all those who want to come to India because of the cost of living, the fear of insecurity and all. But there was a news report in Colombo, Telegraph, which was asked to be opened by refugee in June, that the Sri Lankan Navy is trying to prevent the Tamils from coming to Tamil Nadu. They detained them, they studied them before the court, the time is involved, then they are let go. The Sri Lankan Navy think that it can create a Berlin Wall in the pathway, it cannot create. Hamilton, can you hear? There's no political speaking unless you show me.
Ramakrishnan, you're on mute, and
Oh,
Professor
okay.
also. Yeah.
Professor, are you able to continue, or I think he has muted himself?
Yeah, I think the audio is also not very clear, Ramakrishnan. So just
Okay.
sound him out, and then we can move on. I
Right,
don't know.
right,
Our
right,
audio is
right.
not very clear.
Yes, yes. I don't know how to inform him.
No, I think he can hear you. If you just tell him, he will be able to hear you. I think he'll
Uh,
stop now. Just ask him to unmute.
Okay. Please unmute, Professor. Professor, please unmute. Please go ahead and then please. Please wrap it up your speech as early as possible. Hello. Yes, sir. Please go ahead. Nobody has that. Hello.
Professor, we can't hear you. You have muted yourself again, Professor. We can't hear you. And your audio is also not clear. Yes. It's
Please,
now unmuted.
all right.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Please make your concluding remarks. Right. Okay. Anyway, we will please now, Mr. Eastman.
Thank you. Thank you, Ramakrishnan. Thank you for having me on this panel. So I think we're seeing a situation in Sri Lanka now where frustration has been building up to the extent that people are now, taking to the streets and protesting. But what started off as a protest against the president had moved on to people calling on Mahinda Rajapaksa to also step down. And now we're seeing people also calling for all 225 members of parliament to move out. I mean, that is probably not a realistic demand because, you need someone in there to run the country in the interim till we go for an election. Election is not an answer at this moment, considering the situation that we are facing. Just on India's role here, I think India's role is being appreciated by a lot of people, both on the streets, our politicians and others as well. But there is still this sense of, what's the word, suspicion if there is something beyond, just friendly neighborhood assistance here, or if there is something more that India is expecting later on. Because we saw this with China as well. There was a lot being said as soon as China stepped in. A lot of assistance was brought in. I mean, you all know how close the Rajapakshas are and were with the Chinese. I say are because I still feel that, a few of them, at least the Prime Minister, is very close with the very close with China. Namal Rajapaksa also has a very close association with the Chinese. And we've seen them using the local media, at least certain sections of the local media, to sort of promote that, quote unquote, friendly relations between Sri Lanka and China, to ensure that there is no growing anger towards the Chinese, especially now that some people are blaming China for this current crisis. Although Jehan said earlier that, our debt ratio is not too high as far as China's loans are concerned, but still, a lot of people feel that all these white elephant projects that Jehan spoke about is the cause for some of the, the crisis that we're facing right now. And there is this attempt, from what I have seen, from what I've gathered by speaking to some journalists and others, an attempt to make sure that that Sri Lanka does not lose its relationship with China, that it maintains a relationship with China, and that it continues to accept whatever Chinese authorities offer Sri Lanka, although there may be strings attached. But having said that, a lot of people are, of course, also mindful that India has stepped in at this moment, that they are the ones who are actually bringing in most of the assistance that Sri Lanka requires. And that is being noted by protesters as well. Yeah, the concern, though, again, is that now with a lot of growing anger towards the Rajapaksa administration, and with, as Jehan said, the leftist groups gaining popularity, especially the National Progress, the People's Power, or the JVP, with them gaining a lot of popularity, and with all these student unions also affiliated mostly with the JVP, their policy has always been anti-India. And even yesterday, I was on the street near Parliament where these students were protesting, and they were, of course, tear gassed at that point. But some of the slogans that they were carrying at that point was also that, that there is a hidden agenda as far as India is concerned. So changing that mindset is going to be important for India, for one. And I think whoever, is involved in the Sri Lankan issue, because the young people are being fed this this information that India is also here with a hidden agenda. China is here with a hidden agenda. Western countries are also stepping in with various other agendas. So be mindful of taking assistance from them. So then who do we go to? There is no one coming up with an alternative solution, but they're just saying, don't go to these countries because these countries may have vested interests. So it's important that, that mindset is it's changed, and that the younger generation are not made to think that, there are hidden agenda. I mean, of course, certain countries may have hidden agendas, and the Chinese, many feel that have some agenda. But to think that everybody is coming in with an ulterior motive, even though there may be some motive there, would sort of affect our progress, affect our ability to sort of resolve this crisis, because this crisis is going to take much longer than people think that it will get resolved. A lot of people are, now saying, if we take out all 225, then the issue will be resolved. But then what's the solution? And Rama, you were asking about, if people are now maybe thinking of a new political force. In fact, when I go to the streets, when I spoke to people on the street yesterday, and when I spoke to people on Golf Face, that is being mentioned. A lot of people are actually saying, maybe now it's time that somebody else came in, a new political force takes over, that we have a complete change of heads, as opposed to a complete change of system. Now, the realistic change that we need is a change of system. But, people are saying that maybe new faces would change everything. But the risk is that, that was the same thinking that brought in Gotabaya Rajapaksa. Although he was a known face, they felt that, okay, he was not involved directly in politics. Maybe he will come in with a few businessmen and change the entire thing. And what he did was not change. He did something really worse. I mean, the fertilizer ban was a huge, huge mess. And that has also cost Mahinda his vote base, because I traveled to Hambantota, which was his stronghold, and people who virtually worshipped Mahinda Rajapaksa are now saying that he's a traitor, that he has brought in Gotabaya Rajapaksa and cost them their livelihoods and cost the country. And when you ask these people, so you all voted for him and he seems to have done a lot for this area, they were like, yes, that is the past. Now it's different. So now we definitely don't want Gotabaya Rajapaksa. We now don't want Mahinda Rajapaksa. We don't want Namal Rajapaksa. We want somebody else who would give us a solution and who would actually work on the issues that we face. So this whole thinking of mindsets are also changing now. People are wanting change, but some people are not too sure, who would bring the real change that they expect. We see, a little agitation growing in certain areas against Sajith Premadasa, the opposition leader. The way they are behaving in parliament is also being criticized. The fact that they are arguing and debating issues that are not current sometimes. Even today, just before this webinar, there was a lot of back and forth going on in parliament about Ranil Wickremesinghe and certain other allegations about Sajith Premadasa's mother. Some comments that have been made about his mother instead of discussing the core issue. So people are getting frustrated with the entire parliamentary, with their MPs, and these protesters, these youth have now gathered outside parliament. They pulled down some barricades last night. They've stationed themselves there, and they are trying to move forward towards parliament. And these young boys, you never know what they would do. I mean, yesterday I witnessed how they were using all sorts of ways to bring down the barricades. I'm coughing here because I got caught to the tear gas as well, and I'm still trying to recover from that. And these boys, they were getting hit by tear gas, but they kept going forward. So that sort of thinking, could be disastrous for Sri Lanka later on as well. Because if these boys try to take things into their own hands, that is something you would want to see. As far as the ethnic issue is concerned, and if this may help build the bridges between the Tamils and the Sinhalese, yes, we see a lot of people on the street also talking about that as well. We see even yesterday where where the student unions came and were protesting, we saw boys from Jaffna also joining the protest, and that was unique because when you look on social media, some Tamil journalists from the north are tweeting and they are saying that, this is not our problem, this is your problem. This is because, like Jehan mentioned earlier, this 30-year war, when there were issues in the north, when Tamils were being hit, when Tamils were suffering, very little was said in the south, and no one really took to the streets and protested and demanded accountability, justice, and so on. So now people are talking about the issues that the Tamils were facing. In some of the protests, we've seen posters and images of Tamil journalists who were killed in the north being carried in Colombo, which is quite rare. I mean, one person, Isai Priya, she was working for the LTT-run television station. So the military and the government at the time, never recognized her as a journalist. They called her as an LTT member. But in Galle-Face, we saw her image being taken around by Sinhalese journalists, Sinhalese, the ordinary public as well, calling for accountability and justice over her killing. So we are seeing a change in mindsets there as well. But, whether that will last, I don't know. I'm, of course, a bit doubtful. Because this could also be a case where everybody is just teaming up, joining up to get rid of the Rajapakshas. Once that happens, once things settle down, I wonder whether we will go back to the old style of thinking, because there are a lot of monks involved with these, unions, with these student unions as well, and their thinking has always been different. Changing that mindset also might be difficult. But some of the youth, of course, when I speak to them, youth who are also affiliated with the JVP, they feel that this is going to be a turning point. And if the Rajapakshas step down, that then, this would leave room for better unity to come in, for all communities to work together, and for a proper change in Sri Lanka. But that is in the distant past as of now, because right now the immediate issue is the economic issue and how that is going to be settled. And of course, just like one of the speakers said, there is no roadmap. Nobody's putting forward any plan or roadmap, be it the government or be it the opposition, as to how they're going to address this issue. Even Sajid Premadasa at times he says, he's also questioning India's involvement here. Now, with what basis, on what basis he's saying that, no one knows, because he doesn't say why he's questioning India's involvement. But it seems to be that he's just trying to find some sort of support by saying that, assuming that, maybe there are people who support his views, and then he can, use that later on at an election. But India's involvement is being appreciated by most people. And I think that is something that is going to go a long way after this crisis. If India steps in further, if India does more, and if India, assists in the more critical areas, I'm sure that is going to help our relationship as well. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Iswaran, for your insightful first-hand account. Arun, can you take over?
Hello.
Hello.
So yeah, so almost, I mean, people who spoke here are mostly veterans, and there are veterans like Murari sir. They're all listening this. We spoke about this protest and the mistrust, about all that. So like our journalist friend Mr. Iswaran and Ramakrishnan sir mentioned in the first part, this particular ongoing protest, as he said, rightly said, it has similarities to Jellicut protest or whatever happened in Delhi. So there are reasons, clear reasons, like, the Sajid Premadasa being non-committal. He won resignations, but he doesn't want to take part in the interim government. And the protest, the movement has no leadership, no ideology. So that means, it is not going by the conventional pattern. So the conventional pattern is like, there is an ideology, there is a leader, and they capture the government. So none of these things are going to happen for many internal and for the nature of this protest. But what I feel that, not all such movements, not necessarily all these movements are to win in a conventional way, because for the kind of democratic groups in Sri Lanka, maybe this is a sign that, they can be happy for the fact that this is an organic movement, and the response may be at a lot of pent-up anger that was there in the country for long. Because I was talking to people in Sri Lanka. I didn't visit Sri Lanka in the last 3-4 months, but while I was talking to people in the initial stage, the interesting trend was that people were blaming almost all regimes in the past, almost all leaders in the past, from Sirisena to Ranil to Mahinda to Gota. And now, in the maybe by March, things have changed. People started talking about only about the president, only about the Rajapaksa family. So that means, the anger was reaching a saturation point, a kind of a peak where people have narrowed down something else that actually standing before them. Hello.
You go.
Yeah. So I don't think, these protests really have to win, or the purpose of protest is, necessarily to outthrow a government. So when we come back to the main discussion point, that was about the mistrust of people, the mistrust towards India in the mind of people in Sri Lanka. Maybe, yeah, for good souls, people with goodwill, we can look at it in such a way that, if it would have been really nice if the people of Sri Lanka had a trust towards India, or the other way, like the Sri Lankan Tamils had trust towards the Singhali government. But the fact is that, I mean, it may not be very, very difficult to understand the fact that, the Sri Lankan mistrust towards India is as powerful as the Tamil mistrust towards the Sinhalese, because it is just like how the majority Sinhala Buddhist regime ruling the people of minorities in Sri Lanka. The India also being a big brother, being that powerful neighbor of a very, very small country. So that presence itself will make any country insecure. I have spoke to many. I have friends who tell me that Sri Lankans do not trust India because of LTT. Because India groomed and weaponized a armed rebel group, and they diverted the path of Sri Lanka for the next 3 decades. Last 3 decades from early 80s at least have changed a lot. Even before that, Sri Lanka had a lot of problems, including JVP. But we can see that the mistrust towards India is not only LTT, because even before that, in 71 war, Sri Lanka was with Pakistan. In 60s, there were local assertions to retrieve plantation lands and the Indian origin Tamils from the who were brought in by British. And as we discussed in detail about the JVP role in it, how JVP theorized this Indian expansionist role. Even during the recent programs, I can significantly see this, how JVP theorized these problems of India as a big neighbor. Let it be the recent Tringo oil farm tank, or the Sethi Samudram issue, or Adani coming to Sri Lanka. So JVP was compiling all these, even in the recent years, the kind of campaigns in Sri Lanka. But despite all that, we can see that India has done a lot. India is doing big in helping Sri Lanka, especially after this crisis started. And India has an advantageous position because the kind of response of Sri Lanka to the crisis, China might have expected that they will be approaching China for whatever restructuring, but Sri Lanka, we saw that they immediately turned to Bangladesh and India, and Bangladesh helped immediately, and India is still helping them. So India is helping Sri Lanka in a big way, and for ordinary people who are struggling for fuel and paracetamol and medicines and all these things, essential, even candle lights. Maybe India is playing a big role. So that way, whatever mistrust happened in the past, maybe finding a repair stage, there may be a kind of goodwill that India is playing a big role right now. But at the same time, for ordinary people, it is helping, but geopolitically, it is a big country helping a smaller country is also seen as buying over. So it may be kind of a very complex relationship that existed in the past, and maybe that is what going to continue also. But at the same time, this may be one crucial juncture where India really have take a leverage. India really has a lot to do in terms of at least to ensure that there are no major inconvenience from Sri Lanka, a country which is actually surrendered a lot before China in terms of their financial obligations.
Thanks a lot, Arun, for your observations. I find a number of friends on the audience. Mr. Murari, you have anything to say? Okay. All right. And then Mr. Murari, okay. And then, right. There is one gentleman. Okay, Satyamurthy is also not there. Okay, right.
I think Mayamai is there.
Mayamai is
Yeah. Now can you hear me?
right. Please.
No. So we have. I've heard the presentation of so many people.
Okay.
Quite a few people. The general impression is, I feel it's Sri Lanka has walked into it. It's a kind of nemesis, because I was there when China entered in a big way to counterbalance Indian influence. One man said JVP, even others said they view India with suspicion. That has been there all the time. The last important event was 2008 SAARC summit event. At that time also, even before that, Nirupama Rao, when she was High Commissioner, had a chance to talk to her. In 2005, when China entered in a big way, Hambantota was to be leased out. India was the first they approached. India found it, knew it was unviable, and they showed no interest in that project. And at the same time, India also told Sri Lanka, don't get into the China's debt trap. They will come in a big way. This is new way of expansionism. They give financial assistance at no interest, and then they'll capture. You know what happened? Then they went into Hambantota, now the Colombo project, and long lease and all that. A lot of money must have changed hands. I don't know about that. But this is something they knew they were heading for, but there's nothing they could do about it. More than anything else, can you hear me?
Yes, yes. Please go ahead.
Most important, have you heard of a foreigner, a man who is not even a citizen, taking over as president of that country, Gotabaya? He was all rewarded because the man who led that war against Sri Lanka, I mean the Tamils. Okay. So how can there be reconciliation? And what happened 5 years ago? Sri Lankans, the Tamils are totally out of the picture. They were sidelined and out of the power equation. Maybe a handful of people are in parliament. Besides that, what happened in parliament? Siripala had a problem with getting on with Mahinda Rajapaksa. There was a power crisis. Then Rajapaksa Gotabaya took over and full control as president and prime minister. One family is controlling the entire nation. They say there should be accountability. Okay, they will resign and quit because nobody can take this situation, handle the situation. That can be a national government. But should there not be accountability? They got away with the war crimes. At least now they have landed the country in an economic mess. Should there not be any accountability? Should not be whoever comes there. But the problem is, who is going to succeed them? There is a power vacuum. There is rudderless, no government, chaotic situation. India is doing the right thing. Even Tamil Nadu has said they will come forward to help the people to people. Yes, they should do that. Beyond that, unless there is accountability, even the Sinhalese have to think in terms of accountability. Whoever comes there.
Thank you, Murari.
Okay. It will happen again and again and again. Right. That's my short take on that.
Okay. Mr. Heblikar, how do you respond to this views on anti-Indian sentiment? Of course, there is a tradition, all that they are talking about, the long history. So what should India do to address this problem? Can India do anything to get this?
See, it's a very, very interesting question. It's a very, very interesting situation. When I was at the ICWA 3 years ago, the same question came up for discussion, whether India and Sri Lanka should step away from the developments of the 1980s. The consensus was that yes, a beginning should be made, because the generation that is now in Colombo or in Sri Lanka would want to take a break from the past. What happened in the period, whom do you blame and why do you blame, is something that history will answer. But at this point of time, I think there is a need to take a break from the situation that exists. There is a need to create an ambience where steps could be taken to mitigate these kind of threats. I think what is to be understood is the situation in the north of Sri Lanka is understood more by people in the south of India, and the people in the south of Sri Lanka do not seem to understand what the problems are in the south of India. I think, how do you bridge this gap? Who are the people who are likely to create a a bridge to overcome this. I don't think to use the word suspicions about India, to use the word that there's a fear about India, I think it is misogyny, it is improperly used. Just one instance I give you, when we had the tsunami in 2004, which country was the first to respond? It was India. Within 18 hours. India had the 6 Dornier aircraft flying into Sri Lanka with aid. The Western powers or the other countries came much later. Every time Sri Lanka has an emergency, you respond, the help comes from India. I think that needs to be flagged to the minds of the people. The second one is, I think this particular economic pandemic has now shown that the Sri Lankan polity needs to step away from some of their own ideas that has imprisoned them. You have to reboot yourself. Unless you think big, unless you think that you are moving in the right direction, you cannot address yourself. Somebody did mention about the important role the Sangha plays in Sri Lanka. Yes, the role that Sangha plays is so respectful and so revered that like what the Prime Minister did when he went visited Sri Lanka 2 years ago. Yes, there is a need to reach out, to talk to them. I think all these things are actions in progress, steps in progress, and we need to have patience. Because as far as India is concerned, we don't seem to be wanting to look at Sri Lanka as another outpost of the Chinese. As I said earlier, this economic breakdown has shown that Sri Lanka needs to be very careful as to how it deals with China. India has had the experience right from 1947 dealing with our northern neighbor. We understand them much more, but we are even stronger to withstand Chinese pressure. I think the Sri Lankans have to build different synergies. The first and foremost is to create a sense of trust that India is not a threat, that India is an opportunity, that everybody else, parliamentarians, provincial parliamentarians, local councillors, media, opinion makers, they need to see how things are going to happen in India. One last thing, if any election takes place between now and the next 2 years, the battle will be lost in the kitchen. It's not going to be in the living room, because the housewife is going to tell the future legislators that where they went wrong. Ranil lost in 2004 in April because the housewife felt let down. How many of those 6.1 million people who voted this dispensation into power are likely to remain loyal to them? So that's what my prediction is, unless there is an earnest effort to reboot yourself and to take this particular thing as an opportunity to improve yourself. It's an inflection point. People on the street, in the government offices, and in the political framework, they have to think where they went wrong and how do they address this problem. And what Arun said, or Mr. Ratnam said, accountability is very important. You have to prepare for a vacuum without the Rajapaksas. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Heblika. Dr. Jahan, would you like to respond?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, this has been a very interesting discussion. And what I would, the 3 points I would like to bring up is this, that I think in a way China has been edged out at this time. And we saw China's unhappiness when it even initially objected to Sri Lanka going to the IMF. It made certain unhappy comments about it, but it then changed. It changed because it realized that it was out of sync with what everyone else was saying, including what the Sri Lankans themselves are saying. I think India is better positioned than China, much better positioned, because of also India's relationship with the Quad countries. So I think the government is now, because there's also from the US and the Western countries, the government has felt more comfortable, I think, going with India rather than with China. This is something that has been quite striking, that we expected China to give more support than it has been willing to give. And it has been a bit disappointing, I think, to the government that China has not been happy with with what's happening. And it has been in this current situation, definitely India has taken the center stage in the efforts to support Sri Lanka and stave off this crisis to us. And the other thought I had is with regard to relationship building. I think the Sangha, the monks, are very important. They are actually very important because they are the custodians of our traditions and our memories. And in our history, it is said that the ones who, the people who wrote, we believe the historians who wrote our history were actually Buddhist monks who wanted to preserve Buddhism on this island. And they wrote with that vision, and they gave the Sinhalese a vision that they must protect Buddhism on this island. And it's in that context that the Tamils and India have become kind of like enemies. However, there is one great advantage that India has, which is that it has the birthplace and the sacred sites of Buddha Gaya of Buddhism. Now, in the normal Sinhalese vocabulary, we don't refer to, when we go to the Buddhist sites in India, we don't say we are going to India, we are going to Dambadiva, not to India, Dambadiva. There's another language that is being used. But I think there's a lot of scope, because even in the work that I do in my NGO, these exchange visits are very powerful, where we take people from one community to the areas where the other community lives and enable them to see for themselves. I think, it might be a good investment for India for the government to invest a little bit in the Buddhist monks in exchange visits. And because they would love to go, they want to go to the Buddhist sites, but you can route them through Chennai, through Tamil Nadu, where they will see that, it's so similar to Sri Lanka. I used to come to India when I was young as a tennis player. I used to play tennis and I remember at a very young age, I came to India when I was 13. And I felt so, even though I didn't know Tamil language, I felt so comfortable in India to travel in the three wheels, to argue with the three-wheel drivers when they try to overcharge. There was no fear because it's so much like Sri Lanka. And I think that opportunity should be presented to our Buddhist monks, who others are very insular. They don't get a chance to travel. And they are, in fact, they feel marginalized by the Western countries also. So because they don't get that chance to speak in English and to travel to other countries. So I think that's something that you need to think about and to help to build the relationships.
Thank you, Jehan. There is one question from, what is her name? Thana Shagrithya. I think she has just started working with Professor Surya Narayan in looking at helping with Sri Lankan refugees in Tamil Nadu. She has raised this question: what is India's true interest in this matter? If the aim is to solve or help its neighbor in this economic crisis, should not India be focusing on solving its internal crisis first? Isn't the fundamental root of all this is crisis between Tamils and Buddhists? If that issue gets resolved, why would there be any need for neighboring countries to get involved? And then she goes on to say that Sri Lanka is very rich in talents and natural resources, and it does not have any, what she calls, any overpopulation issues. It can be so effective if the internal crisis is solved. So India is in a good place to solve that. So that's the question from.
If I may quickly give a brief answer, but my other two Sri Lankans will also want to say something.
Okay.
If I may very briefly say it, I think, India, by coming in, India has helped to bring India. Has been able to limit China's role. Now China was actually, there was a time when China was in the news all the time. And sometimes very arrogantly, the Chinese ambassador was making various statements. He was commenting on everything. But now they have become very quiet. And I think they have got pushed. I mean, India has come more into the center stage. China has, and I think China's presence in Sri Lanka is indeed a matter of great concern to India, in looking at it in geopolitical terms. So I think that purpose has been served to some extent. Now we don't know for how long this will continue, where Sri Lanka will be grateful to India and China will be kept away, or China's expansion will be limited. I think that has to also be thought about, because Sri Lanka is indeed a security threat to India if the Chinese come in too much. But as for the dealing with the Sinhala Tamil problem, that's a problem that goes back in time. It even goes back to our independence, even before our independence. The leaders of these communities were struggling for power. Power sharing, the issue of power sharing, that definitely has to be solved. I mean, we need to solve that problem, but India can give support. Again, India should support it. India should remind us about it. And there is a need for extra, and the Tamil people in particular, because they are a minority in Sri Lanka, they have to look to the internationals. They look to India, they look to the Western countries to give them the strength that they don't have within the country numerically, within the democratic system. They don't have strength because they're a minority, even though they are a regional majority, and they think like a regional, and they think also like a majority. Tamil people are very proud, but they can't defend themselves within the parliament. So India's constant reminder to Sri Lanka, India always reminds Sri Lanka that the Tamil problem needs a just solution. The Western countries also are putting pressure. But I think in the end, the Sri Lankans have to also deal with it themselves. And that's what organizations like ours are doing. We are always trying to bring this issue up and find an amicable settlement. And in fact, this crisis has given us the chance to say that we lost a lot of opportunities during the period of the war to develop our country.
Right.
Our military spending is very high, extremely high. And I think it is something that should be reduced when dealing with this crisis. So those are some of the thoughts that I would want to share.
Right. Ishwaran, I have one question. There is a perception that the entire agitation that is going on in Colombo is being dominated by the elite of Colombo, number one. And there is support from some corporate group and all that. It's all backing. So it is what they say is that the insinuation that I quote, what the message that I can get is that it doesn't. Those who are on the Gal face, they don't represent the genuine population of Sri Lanka. They are the cream of Colombo, but they have some problems. So that's why they have come out and all that.
Well, although the focus is on the protests in Colombo, Ramakrishnan, protests are taking place right around the country. It's just that, there's a lot of media attention on the protest that's taking place in Galway because of, these hashtag slogans that have been given to these protests. I mean, Go Gota Village or Go Gota Gama, Galway has been named as Go Gota Gama or Go Gota Village. Then, the protest that's taking place near the Prime Minister's house has been given a different name. Now the protest in Parliament or near Parliament has been given a different name. But then these protests are, of course, taking place outside Colombo as well, in Galle, in Mathura, and, in Kandy. So it's not really something that is an issue that is being, brought on by the Colombo elite. Of course, this issue is also being raised, or this Colombo involvement is being raised because there's a lot of assistance coming in for the protesters who have gathered at Galle Face and near Parliament. We see lots of vehicles driving in, people bringing in water, food, all sort of medication. Although Red Cross has also established itself at Galle Place, a lot of people are bringing in all sorts of assistance. So people are questioning, where is all this coming from? Are these, people, businessmen funding these protests? And that has led to this impression that this is just an issue for people in Colombo, and as a result, they're funding the entire protest just to keep it alive. But in my opinion, and based on what I have gathered by going on to the streets out of Colombo, it's not just a Colombo focused issue. It's an issue that a lot of people outside Colombo, probably more, people outside Colombo feeling the heat more than the people in Colombo, because people in Colombo can, to a certain extent, they can manage. But people outside, like the farmers, they are struggling big time. So they, they can't sustain the protests, of course. Again, like in Galle, they're not getting the same sort of assistance and funding. So, they were saying that, they need more money to sustain the protests. So they've given up in certain places because the same support is not there for them, but the issues remain.
Thank you, Ishwaran. There is one senior journalist from Gulf, Vipulananda Sivakumaran is also on the audience. So he wants to raise a question. Vipul?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I just want to add to Mr. Jahan Pereira's comments on this Buddhism, the importance of the interaction between Buddhist monks in Sri Lanka and India. At the same time, I must say that there is an issue about this Article 9 of the Sri Lanka Constitution, which gives the state protection for Buddhism, which is a sensitive issue for the people, at least in the Jaffna Peninsula and the Eastern Province. So there are calls now, even when India is helping. I have heard in Tamil forums saying that India should make it conditional to the solving of the 13th Amendment or this Article 9 issues and all that, because while Buddhism is also important, other religions also Sri Lanka should give. I mean, like if they are going for a referendum on the 21st Amendment bill, there are requests for include this type of issues, which Supreme Court will say it needs a referendum. I mean, people supporting referendum to repeal this type of kind of clauses, which kind of hurt the equality clauses. So I just want to add to this. That's all.
Any response, Jehan or anybody?
Yeah, I think if India actually openly says that the aid is conditional on amending Article 9 or the 13th Amendment, it would probably be counterproductive, because then it would be seen as India having some agenda to actually divide the country. This is the great fear of the Sinhalese, that the external world wants to divide the country. And it's very easy to mobilize that. Now, at a time when that type of thinking is diminishing, it would be inadvisable to I think, bring that, to say it so openly. I mean, what India can do is, India can tell our leaders whom it is helping this privately. It could also fund education programs on these issues. But I don't think openly India should make their condition, because then immediately it will be used by the nationalist side to create fears among the people, and even the people will start, maybe resenting that, because these are very sensitive issues about the role of Buddhism in the country.
I have a question for Muthu. Having participated in a revolutionary socialist movement, do you think that Sri Lankan politics will be dominated by radical left elements in the coming years?
I think now the JVP is the only source for that, because JVP now radically, now they are getting their support from the ground, because my earlier also, one of our presenter, Mr. Jan, mention that how it reflect in the elections. But only thing is, apart from JVP, there's another force called Revolutionary Front. There is a breakaway group. But these people can gain this the current protest and they can come out. But the only thing is, I am doubt that they can also bring some kind of a radical changes. For your information, that now, even though the Sajid's coming from the representing the capitalist class of Sri Lanka, then he said that if I come to power, I will implement the 13th Amendment in a fulfilled manner. But JVP still didn't utter a word about that. So therefore, we can't see that kind of a radical thing. But what has happened was, because now, not like any other country, even for us, take that the Tunisia, where the Tunisia, when the youth suppression was taken place, the radical parties, especially the left, even the Tunisia, they also take that opportunity and they brought some kind of changes in the constitution. Even after the constitution was formed, even the radical women group also come out and they changed the constitution. But here I didn't see that type of thing, because JVP also don't have any kind of still they didn't submit any kind of a proposal, because they say that if we come to power, we can sort out the economic issues, but they are not submit or propose any kind of a political proposal for the future of the country. So that is the one thing. Another one is I want to comment, because regarding the Sangha, the Sangha issue is the biggest thing in the political arena in our country. But for your information, that during the Yapalana government, that is the Ranil's period, they also initiate some kind of a cultural relationship to build it, because that mythology thing is the Nuvaraliya Sita temple, and build up that temple and link with the India, and also they try to build a link to promote what Dr. Jayan also meant, Dambadiva, instead of Dambadiva, they promote that reducing the flight fare and all that they initiated, but that also failed. So that type of thing we should promote, because another thing is from the beginning, because unless we convince the Buddhist monks of Sri Lanka to get it off from the pier, then we are not in a position to build a good relationship with this India. Because in this crisis, one thing India gained, especially we want to thank Dr. Jaisankar, is a diplomat career, but they failed in during Dixit period also, because to get it off from China, they took this good opportunity where the China tried to foot on the northern peninsula and also in the eastern province, and also China want to cover the Ambantota. But they were very cleverly, he insisted, he got signed the agreement for the maritime, and also for these what is that called, get it off from north and the east. That is a good thing already India has gained in the political and also the regional security perspective. But there's a failure is the other side, the community that get it off the peer psychosis of the community is the most important thing. So for that, they should invite the Buddhist monks. There's a special program we should create, and also to give kind of a opportunity to them to realize what is the federalism exists in India, as well as for the JVP. Because JVP also from the beginning, JVP anti-India, and they have ideologically that perspective. But India should cultivate with the JVP also to come and see what is happening, what is the Indian federal system. Then it should be, we should, this is a good time to to link with both organizations to this up.
Thank you, Muthu. Ashik Bonafar is an academic. Ashik, do you have anything to say? Okay.
I think Murari sir wants to.
Murari says no, but I have. And then I think Ashik is not responding. So, Mr. Satyamurthy, do you have anything to say?
Thank you.
Right.
It was a very interesting and informative session as always.
Mm-hmm.
I think the focus has shifted all the way away from economic problem to political issue.
Mm-hmm.
And political issues are deadlocked, unfortunately. We have the twin demands of the opposition, which can form an alternate government, is that both the president and prime minister should go. Yes, the president, prime minister may lose, despite what the deputy speaker election, the government may have won. I read somewhere a singular translation of a singular news item that still SLFP of former president Maithripala Sirisena may vote against the government in the no confidence motion. But still that is going to leave President Gota in his place. Then will the new remaining people come forward to form a government? Or are you going to have an SLPP, SLFP, or this 150 own MPs or 148 or 150 MPs going to form an alternate government with a new prime minister? How stable is it going to be? And no one is talking about the economy. In fact, even here, mainly, only Mr. Hebliker talked about it, and you are quoting extensively from Finance Minister Ali Sabri. One good thing about this protest is that Ali Sabri is getting his freedom to act on what he wants. And he is not a finance man, so it's going to take a lot more time. Two, everyone is talking about IMF, etc. IMF is we are talking only in terms of about $4 billion. How long will it help? And interestingly, again, as a few people have mentioned, other than India, no one, and possibly IMF, no one has come forward to pick up any tab on anything. China has promised funds, but we are told that it is to repay old loan, right? So the next, I would say at least 2-3 years is going to be very, very difficult economically. Then recovery is going to take another 5 to 10 or even 15 years. Unfortunately, no one in Sri Lanka, including academics, are talking about it. And okay, let us say this government goes. Does anyone have an economic action plan? No. That is the greatest pity of the situation. And as we heard, and as I have been writing, we have both the JVP and Kumar Gunaratnam's FSP, Frontline Socialist Party, pitching in with the organization for these protests. There's a combo. See, I'm happy to hear from Mr. Muthulingam and also Iswaran that there are people are agitated, even in the interior south, etc. That is good. But in Colombo, I am not surprised by this protest. Colombo was always anti-Rajapaksa on the one side, that is a pro-UNP, pro-SJP, right liberal capitalist, and the suburbs are JVP and NPP, that is Bimal Veeravansa. As we know, successive parliamentary election, Bimal Veeravansa has been getting the highest number of votes from Colombo district. So that is not surprising. And if this government is to win the confidence, win the no confidence vote, and they are going to continue, what will happen to this protest? Will the protesters turn violent? Because already today you have a hartal where almost every organization has chipped in. All government servants have chipped in. But what if under the constitutional scheme, the government continues? There is a dichotomy which no one is talking about. Will it protest then turn violent? If the people get frustrated and from Gulf Face Green go back home, that is a victory for the Rajapaksas or whoever, the political class. It is not just Rajapaksas I'm looking at. The entire political class will be having a lost laugh. And interestingly, none of these protesting organizations or the ever active NGOs and civil society organizations have gone to the Supreme Court asking them to ask the government to get out. Sri Lanka, despite some of my Sri Lankan friends have said, no, we don't have a credible judiciary. The judiciary proved its credibility in 2018 December, when they restored throughout Mahinda and restored Ranil. No civil society organization doing it. The government is also not going to the Supreme Court asking for an order saying or a clarification. There is only one way of throwing out this government. That is through the constitutional means, through parliament. I think that is, I stop.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Satyamurthy. Mr. Murari. Mr. Murari.
Murari was there until now.
He's there, but I think he's.
No.
Murari raised his finger also. Murari. Right. So Sashi can.
Yeah, can you?
Yes. You go ahead. We are waiting for you. You want to say something?
Timothy made a mention about how this government should be got it off. Well, you do have to go to Supreme Court for a direction. Parliament is already the opposition have to come together for no compromise motion. The problem is Mahinda is a prime minister. This government can be removed. President continues. That is the flaw in the constitution. He can only be impeached. That is the lacuna system. That he has built in into the constitution, has made it impractical. Nobody can challenge him. That is one aspect of it. Second aspect is that even in a crisis like this, I see there is nothing like a national identity in Sri Lanka. 13 years have gone by since the war ended. How did the war end? Mahinda Rajapaksa painfully thanked India for in the war effort. See, the Western powers are out and the LTT was crushed. Fine, done. Excesses were done on both sides, everything's over. But what did Mahinda Rajapaksa promise? Once the LTT menace was got it out from his point of view, 13th Amendment? 13th Amendment plus. But what has it gone? Nothing has happened. The ethnic question remains unresolved. Though equally the Tamils are also affected. You see, only a trickle here to Tamil Nadu, 13, 15 people coming here. But the entire population, entire nation in Sri Lanka is in a crisis. Equally, the Tamils and others are also equally affected. But they don't have a sense of because they have no power. Only the Sinhalese are still handling the situation. That is the situation. And secondly, I recall a similar situation in India. We went through a very grave crisis in 1989 when Chandrasekhar was the Prime Minister. We had no money. Foreign exchange was in the doldrums. We had to pledge our gold to the IMF loan. How did he come out of it? Because we had a sense of nationhood. That identity was there. Bangladesh crisis. I remember paying, every citizen paid tax for that to take care of the refugees for 1 year or 2 years. That sense of participation, accountability is still, even in a crisis like this in Sri Lanka. Everyone is fighting for his own turf and for his own political objective. At least now, you get this Tamils also involved. Their diaspora is spread all over the world. They can chip in with whatever money they can. If you give them a sense of belonging, that justice will be done to them, there'll be political power will be done to them. They'll be treated as equals. That is all they're asking for. As far as India is giving aid, who gives aid without the strings? Tell me. We talked about PL48. I can start all that. Sphere of influence. There's something called sphere of influence. We have acted on our own self-interest. If China comes in, then our security interests will be affected. So we move in and do that. But we are not trying to take over the government or topple the government. Those days are over. Sphere of influence will naturally be there. You can't have, you give the aid, but you will not be grateful to your big brother. That kind of attitude will not help. India is the only country which can bail them out of this condition. That doesn't mean India, all that India will ask for is from the point of view, resolve the Tamil question. The only outstanding is the Tamil question. Then you can solve all the problems together. But I think that that mindset is still not there. They are not ready to accept the Tamils as equal. That is the unfortunate aspect of it. Even a crisis, that is the situation. That's my submission.
Thank you, Murari. On behalf of Press Institute of India, I thank every one of you, especially the panelists and the three excellent panelists from Sri Lanka, Dr. Jahan, Dr. Muthulingam, and Mr. Iswaran, and Professor Surya Narayan, Mr. Heblika, and Arun, so for their insightful analysis. I thank Mr. Sashi also for giving me an opportunity to anchor the discussion. And I thank the staff of Press Institute of India for having supported this event. Thank you, one and all.